All right, so if you accidentally close out of your terminal or close out of your virtual environment or command prompt, depending if you're on Windows or not, sometimes it might be a little bit tricky to actually get back to where you were, just because you just haven't done it that often, and that's okay. So I'm going to show you on terminal how to actually get back. So I just opened a new one, and you can tell by it saying last login, and then it says JMitch up here. Now to navigate through terminal, we can just do ls to list out where we are, and then cd to change into any directory we need to go. So in this case, I'm going to change into the desktop, where that's where I stored my virtual environment for e-commerce. So I do cd desktop. And if I list everything out in here, I see a list of all this stuff. And I see my e-commerce one, so I go cd e-commerce. And now I'm back in, so I can do source bin / activate on Mac to activate it. And then on Windows, it'd be / scripts / activate to activate it on Windows. So that's how we get back activated. If you forget about this, you don't actually have to watch the video again. You can go onto our GitHub under guides. You can see reactivate virtual env, or you could even scroll down to the README. There's a reactivate e-commerce link right there. So reactivate the virtual environment, and that will take you right to the most current version of the steps that we just went through. And it shows you some other stuff if you didn't actually follow along. And just so you know, if you want to ever know where you are as far as the computer is concerned, you can type out pwd on a Windows and pwd on a Mac. Windows, you type dir, and it would show you a path very similar to this. Dir on Windows also lists everything out as well. All right, so now that we've got that handled, let's go back into our e-commerce project, and we now need to add a place for our static files. So all of our static files, I'm actually going to keep them separate from our main project. So what they're going to be, if we look at our project files, in our virtual environment, we've got this e-commerce. You won't have this guides. I just have it because we are adding it into the code. And you'll have this e-commerce, and then there's going to be your e-commerce code, all of the Django code in here. So this is the e-commerce project, and then within that project, the root of it will have manage.py, the e-commerce configuration folder, products, and templates. Okay, so I want to separate out my static files from e-commerce, because when I actually bring it to a live server, we are going to actually send it to be used separate outside of our project. So it's not actually going to be used within our project like how templates is currently being used. All right, so to do this, we have to make a new folder. I'm going to make a new folder within this virtual environment, and I'm going to call it static. All right, so that static folder is where all of my static files are going to be. So that's JavaScript, CSS, images, all my uploads like for media. So let's make one called media. And then I'll make another one called static root. And then static files. All right, so static root, we won't touch a whole lot. We'll see what static root does shortly. Static files is where we'll actually upload our static files. So this is where we'll put CSS, JS for JavaScript, IMG for images. So that's where you would put those things. Now, as far as uploads, in that last one, we uploaded a picture. Now we're going to actually upload it into this media folder instead of within the app. So we'll do that here shortly too. So now that we have these files, let's actually look for the location of them. And I'm going to open up terminal, and I'm going to list everything out into my virtual environment. And I see static is right here, so let's go into cd static, and I'll type pwd. So this is the direct link to static, right? If you're on a Windows and you type dir, yours is going to look a little bit different. And for those Mac users that don't see that, you're going to realize, hey, if you're on a different operating system and you are providing a direct link in any of your settings, you're going to run into some issues, right? So let's actually see it in work, in action, just so we can see what it's like. Mac users, go ahead and grab this. Windows users, grab the dir version of it. So that is called your path, or it is a path to where we're going to be going. So now inside of e-commerce settings, settings.py, we're going to scroll down all the way to where static URL is, and we're going to write media URL, and we're going to set that equal to media, just like static above it. And then I'm going to set something called media root, and I'm going to add in static / media with a trailing slash. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do temporarily. We're not going to keep this long term. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go and start our project again. So cd into e-commerce, cd into e-commerce. Nope, I need to be in the root of the virtual environment to cd into e-commerce. All right, so if I list everything out, I'm going to clear everything and do python manage.py, syncdb, sorry, not syncdb, but run server. All right, so now it's running the server, and once that's up and going, we are going to go into the admin, and then we're going to go to product images. We're going to add a new image. I'm going to add it to our product, and then I'm going to grab an image, and I'm just going to grab a screenshot here that I took. It was kind of funny. I saw a ad on Facebook that says create your own mobile app in 5 minutes. I think that's kind of ironic because you can't, it's not really your own app because nothing takes 5 minutes to create. Anyway, so we'll upload that and we're going to save it. All right, so it says product 1 image was added successfully. So if I look in my static folder now, I see static, media, and products, and then images, and now that screenshot. Right? So it's now uploaded there. So it actually just made a duplicate of it and uploaded it to our media root section. Right? So media root, set it to here. Well, we want it to be smarter than that, just like what we did with templates, right? But this one is not going to take us into this file, these files right here. That would take us to look where templates is, which if we look back in e-commerce, it would be right here. So we need to jump back a directory and then look for this static directory and then the media directory. And it's not really that challenging, but I'm going to, I'll comment this one out and copy it and paste above it. I'm going to leave that just for a note so you guys can see how it's supposed to look, or how it looks when you do directly to it, so the path to it. So os.path.join. So this is going to be joining two paths together, and using os.path allows it to use the operating system's path and the way the operating system works. And it has to have OS imported, which it probably does if you are using 1.6 or greater. So now that we have that, we can take the base directory, and then we want to get static and media. Right, so this is going to look for the static folder and then media. But there's something wrong with this. This is joining the base directory, so where the base directory is, where manage.py is, and then it's looking for a folder called static. So if we go in here into our file, we don't see a folder called static, so I have to bring it back up one. So I'll do os.path.dir name and then take that. So this is getting the directory name above where this base directory is. So it's saying, hey, grab where this directory is and look in here. Instead of looking in that directory, it's looking above it. And then it's looking for static and then media. So this is actually set just fine. So let's upload another picture just to see. And this time I'll do a different one. Or actually, I'll stick with the same one. And same product. Hit save. It says it's added successfully. That's good. Now if we go into product roots, we now see that there's two images. It's the same image, but at the end of it, it says _1. So it auto incremented the same image, which is kind of nice. So if you accidentally add the same image over and over again, it will save it for you with that extra little auto increment with 2 at the end, and then it'll just keep going up by numbers. So that's pretty cool. So that is how we set up our media files But what if we want our static root and our other static files? So static root is where we're going to collect our files to. So I can copy this exactly and put it in the static root folder. And just like what we called it, if we scroll back, we see static_root. This is how I'm going to set it, the static root. And then the next one would be static files dirs. And this is a tuple, so similar to the template dirs, it's going to have that comma at the end. I can copy this one, paste that in there, and then call this static files, static_files, just like what we see here. All right, so if we save that, now what we can do is run python manage.py collect static. This command will collect all of our static files from the static files folder into the static root folder. So if I hit enter, it's going to say, do you want to overwrite existing files? We're going to say yes, because when we upload and change files, we want to override the static root files, so we can say yes. And just like that, we have overridden the static root files. And you notice it actually added a bunch of files that, well, we didn't have in there. And what it does is it adds the admin files into our static root. So all of the admin CSS and JavaScript is going to be in here. So that's our Django admin. This right here will all be in there. So let's actually run the server again. So python manage.py run server. And if I refresh in here, and I'm actually going to clear out my browsing data. And that's going to load up for a second. So I'm going to pause the video and then come back after it's. So our static files on our admin still seem to be loading. So if I go into inspect element and I go to the elements and then down at we want to look in the head, and then we see we have static admin CSS base. So if I click on that, it actually still loads our admin styles, which is good. So it's going to static admin, because we set the static URL, and it's going to look for those static files just fine. So that's good, but what if we actually changed our static files on our base template? That's actually what we'll do right now. So instead of using the, let's say for instance, the original theme, instead of using Bootstrap CDN, let's actually go ahead and put this on our local computer. So I'm going to copy all this up to the slashes, not including the slashes. And I'm going to go into just any tab and go here. And then I'm going to do File, Save As, and I'm going to add it into our static files, and then CSS. All right, so notice the name of it. We're going to save it in there. Okay, so then back into our original theme, I'm going to just remove this for now. So I'm going to actually comment it out with HTML comments. So we'll save that. And we're going to go back into our home page here. Take a look at our home page. Okay, it doesn't look like a whole lot has changed, so let's actually go ahead and comment out the two of them. All right, so now we lose our Bootstrap file. So I'm actually going to, for the purpose of this example, I'm going to actually copy this one as well. So we'll copy this, and we're going to save this one. So save as, into Bootstrap theme, save it. All right. So that should save along with the static files. So let's actually look. In our static files, CSS, we now have Bootstrap theme and bootstrap.min. So if we want to actually see how Django works with static files, we can go back into our settings file and look at this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and open it up in Chrome. I already actually have it open. Now you'd want to make sure that static files is in your installed apps. By default it is. So if we look back into our settings and into installed apps, scrolling up, we see static files right there. So by default, it's already working. So now going forward, this is how we're going to load our static files, just like this. So I'm going to do it with our new CSS. So I'm going to go load static files, copy that, and go into my base settings. Okay. So I'm going to load in static files, and I'll do link real equals to style sheet, and then href equals to, and it's going to be static, and it's going to be bootstrap.min.css. But it's in the CSS folder, so we do CSS/, and that's it. So that's all we'd have to add for the main Bootstrap file. And then we can copy this, and we can copy the Bootstrap theme, so it's bootstrap-theme. All right, so this will now load in our static files just as it should. Now this is assuming that our static files are being served. So to actually serve the static files during development, which is what we're doing right now, is development, we have to actually update these. And one more thing I noticed, I actually have to put these into quotes, and I'll use single quotes because inside the static call I use double quotes, so single quotes on the outside. There we go. So now those style sheets are ready to go with the exception of actually serving them. So to serve them, we scroll down a little bit more and we see how to actually serve them in development. So we're just going to go ahead and copy this. So I'm going to copy this right here and go into my URLs file. And I'm just going to add this in for now, just this. All right. And then we also have to import settings. So we'll do from Django.conf import settings, as it says also above that. All right, and then I'm going to just rearrange things so they are in nice order and they look nice and clean. All right, so this is adding the ability for us to load our static files. So we're going to actually see what it's like without it first. Okay, and now that we have new static files in this folder, we have to run collect static. So if we ever make changes to these static files, we always run collect static. So just get in the habit of doing that. So we'll go to terminal and we'll do python manage.py collect static. Press enter, and then it'll say, do you want to overwrite files? You say yes. And notice it copied the Bootstrap theme and Bootstrap min into static root. And we can verify by going into our finder, into static root, CSS, Bootstrap min, and theme. Perfect. All right, so now if we go back into Chrome, make sure our server is running, of course. Python manage.py, run server, and go back into our main page there. Cannot import name setting. Make sure it is settings, plural. Do a refresh. It's still not loading. And that is because we don't have it in our URLs, we don't have it being served. So when we get into production, we're not actually going to use this. So what I'm going to do, instead of actually appending it to the URLs that way, I'm going to do if settings.debug, then URL patterns plus equals, so it's adding from this tuple to this. This is what we'll add in. So all this is doing is saying if in settings debug is true, so in settings, if debug is true, then we will actually serve the static files. So when debug is going to be true, we'll only be in development, right? So when we're on our local computer, because we don't want it on when it's in production. We will have it false then. So then this will no longer be a setting that's running. And this is also because we don't want to serve our static files from our Django project like this. We would do it in a different way, and we'll get to that once we actually go live. So let's save that. We'll go back into our project here, and we'll run the server, do a refresh. Looks like we might still be having a little bit of an issue, so let's actually see what's going on. Into our static, I'm going to click on one of our files in a new window. And it's saying the file is not found. So we can take a look at URL patterns. Let's make sure that's correct. Yep. All right, and this is where it'll help to actually pay attention when you're coding. Sometimes little spelling errors can go a long way. So going back into our Sublime text, I'm going to go into base, and notice that I typed out bootstrap, not bootstrap. And this happens to all of us. You make little spelling errors and it might take you a long time to figure it out. So just keep in mind that if you get into those errors, you can look at the source code that's online and check it against what you've got. So let's save it and do a refresh into our home page. And there it is. Our code is back. And if I take this off, so I'm going to just say if not settings.debug and refresh in here, it actually might be in the cache. So let's actually take a look. So it looks like it's loading it correctly. So I'm going to empty out our browsing data again. And there it goes. Do a refresh. And it looks like it's still pulling through. So the big part of this, the reason that this would be pulling through is because of how we're using load static files. But again, when you're working in production, you want to make sure that it's like this, because there's no guarantee that this is going to work each time. Where this doing the two things will definitely make sure that it works, and it's also recommended in the Django documentation right here. So if we're doing static files in development, this is exactly what it says to do, and that's where we're at here. And then if we scroll down a little bit, we can also add in the media files. So if we do any uploads and we want to show those uploads, we would add it with the media stuff, which is essentially the same as static, right? If you notice here, it's basically the same. So this is the same type of thing that we would want to do with our media, and that would allow us to actually call our media stuff, and we'll get to that once we actually upload more pictures for our products. All right, so that was serving static files. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we are going to continue on. And again, if you ever get stuck or anything like that, just go to the reference code and all the lectures will be in there, or at least lectures with code will be in there for a reference for you, and the most recent code as well. All right, so we will see you in the next one.